Hey listeners, George here. I know I'm a part of the podcast and I'm doing a bumper for the podcast. It's a little weird. Listen, just listen, okay? Greg and I do another podcast called PlayStation Power where we cover PlayStation and PlayStation 2 games. It's not family friendly, but you might like it. Also, if you like me on this podcast, I also do other things. Master System Masterpieces, we cover Master System games, and we even have a podcast, The Box Fort, not family friendly, but my co-host Joe and I sit down, talk about wacky and weird things, uncensored, and sometimes we bring on a guest and it gets really fun. So if you're not easily offended, and you're able to withstand this uncensored content, please take a listen to The Box Fort. You can find them on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, or just on my website, which is tibboxfort.com, TEHBOXFORT.com. Thank you, and now the SNES podcast with Greg and George. That's me.
At $200, a Super Nintendo setup costs twice as much as the old system. For the money, the company promises better pictures, sound, and adventure. Now you're playing with power, superpower. You're the king, I tell you! The king!
Only for Super NES. You're listening to the SNES podcast with your hosts, Soul Blazer and George.
Hello everybody, welcome to Super NES Podcast. This is episode number 68 for your listening pleasure. This is one of your regular co-hosts, Greg, joined by always it's my other faithful co-host, George.
Pachinko! Pachinko!
Different episode this time, George. Down.
Oh no!
So we did our special episode last time, and we actually have no special episode for you guys and girls this time because as we teased earlier, we finally have our first guest hosts like in this podcast. The first of several guest hosts planned like the near future actually. And we are very honored and very pleased to have a noted like video game book writer and also fellow podcaster on the ColecoVision podcast, Brett Weiss, joining us tonight.
Hey, how's everybody doing?
Very, very glad to have you on the episode like us, Brett.
Oh, thanks. I'm glad to be here.
So, a little bit of background. Brett recently posted a message on Facebook, which really made me quite happy to read it. That Brett's currently in the stages. We're going to ask him exactly how far along like it is here in a moment, and on some other questions. But he's currently in the works of writing a book like on the Super Nintendo, and which made me very happy because they while I've read a lot of other books about specific consoles in the past, I don't think there's been a specific book about the Super NES by itself published up to now. So definitely very, very interested to like I read that when it comes out. So and I
would really like to read it as well.
Yep. So I've read some of Brett's books in the past already, so I know he's a very good author as well. So so I reached out to him asking if he could make some time in his busy schedule to come on the podcast with us, and here he is. So.
Oh, hey. Well, one thing I do want to correct one thing you said. There actually has been one Super Nintendo book.
Really?
It's by a guy named Jeffrey Wittenhagen.
Okay.
And it was a self-published book that he did through a Kickstarter program. And people think I'm crazy. People think I'm a little crazy for.
No, you're right. I remember that now. Yeah. Right. Yeah. I'm sorry. But that's not. But that's not come out yet either, right?
It come out pretty recently, I believe.
Okay.
I requested a review copy, but he said right now he's just focusing on his Kickstarter backers.
Yeah, you're right. I did forget about the Kickstarter. I didn't back that one because I backed the one because the only option he had available was the physical book, and the price was just too much money like me at the moment to pay to back it. But I will get that later on eventually. Eventually, I think so.
Yeah, I think he had like some. He did a lot of the write-ups himself, and he had some of his YouTube and I think like Nintendo Age Buddies or something. I do some of the write-ups. I have the original Nintendo book he did.
Oh, okay.
And then he recently did a Super Nintendo one book, but mine's going to be quite a bit different than his.
Cool.
In a lot of ways. So it's anyway. I just wanted to mention that, just so. I mean, I'm always happy to. People think I'm a little crazy, but I promote other authors' work too. So
right.
You know, so I just wanted to let you know that was out there.
No,
right.
you're all brothers in that field, and if you can help each other, that's awesome.
Yeah, that's part of it. Not everybody feels that way. I've noticed.
Yeah.
But one thing is, my primary income is from writing articles for newspapers and magazines. I write for the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, which is in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. It's a big metropolitan newspaper, and I write for Antique Week, which is a national publication. And so the large bulk of my income is writing for newspapers, magazines, and websites. The book writing is awesome, and it's cool for doing autographings and things. But just percentage-wise, I guess that's how I can afford to talk about other people's works too. If books were the only way I made a living, I might be a little more hesitant to shout out other writers. But but since my primary source of income is articles, I don't have a problem with. But anyway, I am kind of the whole brotherhood, kumbaya kind of guy. I like to promote other people that are doing good work and that kind of thing. So I have no problem with it.
Yeah,
like how we like to promote. I was just gonna say, just like how we like to promote other podcasts.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool, man. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you've also jumped into the world of podcast recently. Seemed to become like one of the regular co-hosts on Willie's ColecoVision.
Oh yeah, I have a lot of fun doing I have a blast doing the ColecoVision podcast because the ColecoVision is actually the first game system I ever owned. In 1976 I was 9 years old, and my two best friends each got a Fairchild Channel F, which was the first actual programmable with cartridges console. It came out 4 years after the original Odyssey, but that technically wasn't a programmable console. With I don't want to get into the technical specifics of it, but the first official programmable cartridge-based console was the Fairchild Channel F, which came out a year before the Atari 2600. And my two best friends had those, and then I had friends in 77, 78, 79, 80. They got the Atari 2600 and television, Odyssey 2. And that was just too expensive. I couldn't even get that for Christmas. And so I would just go to everybody's house and play it. I was obsessed with these games that everybody had. And I would just go to, I knew which one of my cousins, which one of my friends. I knew everybody on the block who had which system and what games and all that. And I was probably a little bit of a nuisance going over to their house all the time to play these systems. But in the summer of '82, when I saw the ColecoVision commercials on TV, I knew I had to get one because they showed Donkey Kong in action and it looked perfect, just like the arcade, at least at first glance and everything. And I was 15 at that point, so I could mow yards and stuff and get money. And so I split the cost of a ColecoVision with Santa Claus, and I got one for Christmas in '82. So I really like doing the ColecoVision podcast because the ColecoVision, I'm very sentimental about that system, and I still love it today and still play it a lot.
Yeah, I don't have too much history with that system because my system as a kid was a Lexus 2600. Plus, I'm also younger than you are, so I was born in '76. So it's really the NES, Super NES that I have the major history and nostalgia for. But
well, most people are younger than me.
Mine was the PlayStation.
Yeah, well, George is the kid here on the podcast. So, but
that's awesome. But I like the PS1.
Yeah, but
and the PS2.
Yeah, so I played some ColecoVision games in emulation, but I really didn't have any history with the system. Like I picked up a flashback when it came out in 2014. And I know it's not perfect, but for what I want, that's fine with me because I think there's some good games on there, and I had my controller modified to give like a proper thumbstick. So
there you go. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, but what it is, it's fine. I don't have any nostalgia or history of the system, so the flashback's fine with me for being able to play the best games on there. But the ColecoVision ports of a Venture and Frogger and not Frogger, Zaxxon, and Frenzy. Those are my 3 favorite games on there. Because all 3 of those games are just excellent. Oh,
Frenzy is killer. Frenzy is so awesome.
But I was going to ask you because I know that from reading some of your earlier books, I know that you're primarily a guy focused on the games on games 70s and 80s, which is why I'm curious as to why you decided to jump to the 90s and do a book on Super NES.
Yeah, well, it's just time to do that. The first book, Classic Home Video Games 1972 through 1984, covered the Atari 2600, Odyssey 2, and Television, ColecoVision, Atari 5200, all those great Golden Age systems, and the original Odyssey as well. Well, when I was through with that book, my publisher was interested in a second volume covering the next era, the NES, the Master System, and the Atari 7800. Well, then the next book after that, Classic Home Video Games 1989 through 1990. Now, the cover dates refer to when the consoles were released. So it was time to do the 3 consoles that were released in 1989. The Neo Geo, TurboGrafx 16, and Sega Genesis. That book, every single cartridge that was released in the U.S. for those 3 systems, or every game, is covered in that book, encyclopedia style, alphabetical order and within by console. So it was time to do a 4th and final Classic Home Video Games book because the next few consoles, after that it would be the PlayStation 1, and I didn't want to do a book on the PlayStation 1 because there's over 1,500 titles, and I just didn't have time or access to that many games to.
That's okay. That gives me access to do it.
Yeah, there you go. You can pick up where I left off.
Man.
So what I was going to do is a 4th volume of the Classic Home Video Games series covering the Super Nintendo, Atari Jaguar, the CDI, and the 3DO. Well, I started working on that a few years ago, and I got really bogged down on the CDI and 3DO, just, finding information in games, et cetera, but I was still plugging along. Well, a couple years ago, I had a new book published, the 100 Greatest Console Video Games 1977 through 1987, through a different publisher. A publisher that the books are actually in bookstores. You can find it at Barnes & Noble and, Books A Million, different bookstores like that. And it's got better production values. It's got, full color throughout. And it's just... I don't know, just a bigger publisher.
Yeah, it's an excellent book. I recommend it.
Oh, thank you.
I mean, you can pick one up on Amazon for cheap. So there's no reason for anybody out there who enjoys this period of gaming not to go out there and get it because it's a great book.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's a hardcover book with a lot of anecdotes, plus history, programmer information, gameplay details, and all that stuff of what I think are the 100 greatest games that were released between 77, when the Atari 2600 came out, and 87, which is when the you get the first 3 years of the NES. So you've got a lot of those early great NES titles like Castlevania, Metroid, Legend of Zelda, Super Mario Brothers. So the book has a good and coming up with that book, I just thought I was reading a book called Keep Watching the Skies about science fiction films of the 1950s. And that particular book covered they would quote other sources. It would talk about anecdotes like seeing the movie for the first time, et cetera, quoting the experts and whatnot. And I thought, well, there needs to be a video game version of that book. And so that's what gave me the idea to do a specific decade.
So you could play through 1950s sci-fi movies. Oh, you mean a book version of video game? Oh, okay.
Yeah. Right. See, there's a book on 50 science fiction that just covers the full decade, and so I applied that concept toward a video game book,
Right.
And so, or towards the video game industry. And so, for me, a crucial decade is 77 to 87. That's sort of the 50s science fiction version of video games, because that's when, during their formative years, and when a lot of innovations and a lot of things were going on, 77 to 80, and what's now is very classic. And so that sort of gave me the idea to do that, was that science fiction book. And so I went through, replayed a ton of these games, and really dug in to find some dark horse game. I didn't want it just to be all obvious choices, but I didn't want it to be. I wanted it to be purely based, like, I wanted it to run the gamut of the decade and not just pick out, all the obvious choices. So I really dug down, and I'd played most of these already anyways because of writing the classic home video games books. I had a lot of experience from this era growing up during that time also. And so the research was pretty well laid out already, but I replayed a lot of this stuff, went back and got a Star Path supercharger for the 2600 so I could fully gauge the value of all those games as well. And I put the games in actual alphabetical. If you look through the book, the games are listed in alphabetical order instead of in order of greatness, because I didn't want people picking up the book, looking back in the 80s and 90s and think, those games aren't that good because they're not in the top 10 or 20 or whatever. I wanted to put them in alphabetical order so they're all given equal weight. Every game, even the lesser known ones, are given 2 to 4 full pages. Yeah. So each game can shine on its own. Super Mario Brothers has an entry, but also, like Turmoil for the Atari 2600, which most people haven't heard of. It's given equal coverage just about. And so I wanted to shine the spotlight on each game,
Right, as a comment, it's never. Sorry. Yeah, no, I was going to also say like in praise, like, it's never easy coming up with a list. Like, anytime anybody comes up with a list of 10 best or 100 best or whatever for whatever thing, there's always going to be disagreements. And for something as daunting as that, I do understand why. I'm happy personally that you didn't rank anything, but it's simply just threw in your personal opinion about the best 100 games. And it's, of course it's objective, but I think I probably agreed with I agree most of your list because because there are some very overlooked games on there that are really fun games. But I think maybe there's probably only about maybe a dozen or so that I don't agree with. But but for a list that big, that's pretty good. So I thought it was really an excellent list altogether.
Well, one thing I did was include quotes from other reviewers, both today, like for websites, and back in the day during the magazines of the time of the early 80s. Right. So you get sort of a broad overview of what people now and what people back then. I even quoted some people that disagreed with my choices just to give a broad perspective. Plus, at the back of the book, there's an appendix of the next 100.
Yes. Yep,
so it lists 100 more games that are worth seeking out.
Right.
That's a really interesting idea, comparing a comment that somebody made about a game back around the time that it came out and comparing it to, modern times. Right. That's a really cool idea.
Yeah, we try to do that on the podcast here, like the games we cover, but it's not always easy.
No.
Well, it was interesting doing that because, like, when Adventure came out for the Atari 2600 back in '79, I believe.
That was a big game.
Yeah, it was a big game. A lot of people said this is the game of the future. This is what people are. This is going to change the industry, which it obviously did. But some people were, there were some. It wasn't 100%. Nobody would dare say anything bad about it now. As far as they might joke about the graphics or whatever, but just as far as the impact it had and the cleverness of the gameplay or whatever. But it wasn't fully embraced when it came out. So it is interesting to look at the old, and I've got a massive magazine collection of the the magazines I grew up reading. I would stand around and there were, in the early 80s, there was a bunch of Electronic Games magazine was the first one that was fully devoted to video games in the early 80s. Well, it had a joystick and Electronic Fun with computers and games. A whole bunch of different titles came out, and I would stand around at the grocery stores reading, every issue that would come out because I couldn't afford to get them all. But, I bought the ones that I could. And since then, I've gone back and replaced all the ones that have, I read them to tatters, so I didn't have them anymore. But I've amassed a pretty big collection of a library of old magazines. So I quoted from those, you know, when relevant for the 100 Greatest book. And so you definitely get a broad variety of opinions other than my own in the book.
Right.
I love when you go back and read like multiple reviews, and you know a lot of people really don't like the game, and then you jump to modern times and like almost everybody loves it. It's so funny.
A perfect example of that is Combat for the Atari 2600.
Right.
Because when it came out, it was fun, and everybody. I mean, people had a lot of fun playing it because everybody had it for their console. But after a while, it got a little bit dated looking, and every time you went to a pawn shop or a garage sale, everybody always had it. So the game started getting kind of a bad reputation just based on how common it was and on how primitive it was. But then today, if you pick it up new and play it, you just have an absolute blast because it's just one-on-one fighting, no luck involved, pure skill. You know, each player has the exact equal footing with the other player. You know, it's never the computer's fault when you died. It's not unfair at all. It's not cheap at all. You know, it's just the perfect, you know, one-on-one game. You know, to me, Combat sort of was the template for, you know, the one-on-one fighting games of the future.
Right.
Well, I've also seen the opposite happen too, because like, you know, like you do, like, you know, where a game was loved back then, but nowadays doesn't have the same praise for it. Like you already mentioned Donkey Kong, like the ColecoVision. That game was praised to the high heavens when it came out originally. But if you look at like modern reviews of it, people realize the shortcomings and flaws that the game has. And
nowadays they pick it apart. They pick it apart pretty thorouly. Yeah.
But
it's still one of the 100 greatest because I put it in there.
Yeah, like it deserves to be, because at the time that was the best home port. Because at the time that was the best home port of the game, bar none.
Yeah, and one prerequisite for the book for a game to be included, it had to hold up today. It had to still be fun today, and I think that game is still fun. I mean, you can pick apart the flaws.
Yeah.
Like, you know, you're pushing up on the ladder for it to go faster. You know, that's not arcade perfect. You know, you push up twice on the joystick for it to go. And you know, there's things about it that aren't arcade perfect, but it's still fun.
Yeah, so I didn't know that you were doing a fourth book like in your classic home video game series. That's pretty cool.
Well, I was. I kind of got this. To finish that story, I was working on the fourth book, and I do have some of the 3DO and CDI stuff written and stuff, and I may complete it someday. But
did you happen to go through Plumbers Don't Wear Ties?
No, I've heard of that, but
I actually have that game.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
Well, see, the problem was I was getting bogged down with the CDI and 3DO and just the commercial aspects of a Super Nintendo book, and I wanted to. Everybody's asking me when are you going to do it? For years, people have been asking me when I'm going to do a Super Nintendo book, and I thought, you know, with the production values of the 100 Greatest book, and I'm getting bogged down in these systems that most people don't care about anyway, I'm just going to go ahead and do a Super Nintendo book.
Yeah, I was just about to say, like, you know, if you had the choice between the two, I mean, obviously go for the SNES book because, you know, how many people care about the CDI and the 3DO compared to all those people who grew up with the SNES?
Well, they do care about it also. Like, if I can also make another, like, you know, a book plug. I'm currently reading the just released Phoenix 4th edition.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, that's a great book.
Yeah, and he does spend considerable coverage talking about the systems. Like, it's a great complete capsule book about the whole history of the video game industry. So I mean,
the fourth classic home video games book, I mean, my original vision of it, and it was going to have the Super Nintendo in there too. It was going to be, you know, Super Nintendo, Jaguar, CDI, and 3DO. I was going to have those 4 systems, but people are asking. Yeah, that's cool. So many people are asking about the Super Nintendo book, and I thought, you know, for this to be, I'm just going to do a Super Nintendo book because it can be full color. I can spend more time on each game, and this is going to be a large hardcover book that's going to be bigger than the 100 Greatest book. It's going to be like a big coffee table book, so the pictures will be bigger. And there will be more information about each game than in the classic home video games book. You know, the classic home video games book, you know, each game gets 1 paragraph, and I try to make it as substantial as possible within each paragraph. You know, to be concise and give you as much information as it could in a short paragraph. But the Super Nintendo book is going to be lengthy entries for each game, and plus screenshots for every game. The box scan, and then some other things like vintage ads and stuff.
Yeah.
So this is
okay.
Yeah.
That sounds great. I was just going to ask you what your actual plan was with covering the system. It sounds like you plan upon trying to give a little bit of coverage to every game in the system that got released in North America.
Every single U.S. release is going to have a full write-up, like a full page or two per game.
Okay.
So like maybe some of the bigger games might have 2 or 3 pages, but even the smaller games will have a full page. And that's the plan now anyway, because I'm getting a lot of good stuff. See, okay, so I'm writing every description of each game, like going into gameplay details with some review commentary as well. So I'll do each game. But what I've also been doing is for most of the games, I'm having outside contributors that are in the industry.
Ah.
And so,
nice.
Yeah, and what they're doing is writing anecdotes, like stories of growing up playing the game, getting the game for Christmas, special hate for a particular game, how a game maybe bonded them. Like I've got some really cool stories about a guy bonded with his grandfather playing a game, stuff like that. And I've had some really cool contributors. For example, there's been some game programmers contribute to the book, like, let's see. Well, I'll just go on the list here. I'll name off a few, like 8-Bit. I don't know if you guys ever see. You guys know 8-Bit Eric Perez? He's a pretty popular YouTuber.
Yeah,
he's got a real popular. Yeah, he's got a popular YouTube channel, so he's written some stories for the book. I've got Chris Baker, who worked for in the Marvel video game division.
Right.
Yeah, and Tim Lapatino, who wrote Art of Atari. He's got some stories in there.
That's also a great book, by the way.
Oh, absolutely. Ben Reeves, editor with Game Informer. He's got several stories in there. And then some programmers like Chris Wojta. I'm not exactly sure how to... some Atari programmers and Super Nintendo programmers are contributing. Patrick Scott Patterson, the big media guy.
Yep.
Brittany Brombacher, the blonde nerd chick, she's got some stuff in here. Good variety of YouTubers, programmers, authors. Blake Harris has an entry in here that wrote the Console Wars.
Right.
I
have that book.
Willie Culver's got a couple of stories in here. So yeah, it's just a wide range of different convention exhibitors, programmers, reviewers, YouTubers. Michael Thomason, who's a video game professor, he teaches like college level video game design courses.
Nice.
So yeah, I've got a good variety. So you'll have a lot of other voices in here other than my own, and you're going to get a lot of personal stories that people really seem to like reading.
Awesome. Do you plan to do a list, maybe possibly as appendix or whatever, about your personal opinions as to what the best or worst games in the system are going to be, like you do with the 100 Greatest book?
Ooh, that's not a bad idea. Just at the back, maybe just have a list of my favorites or something like that. That's not a bad idea. I will mark that down as a possibility.
Now you have to put thanks to the SNES podcast on the back.
No, I'm gonna pretend this was my idea.
Oh, okay.
No, I will definitely include special thanks for the SNES podcast, just because for the idea, plus having me on. That's a special thanks right there. So I do have an announcement to make about the book.
Sure.
That I'm just revealing here for the first time.
It's out now.
Yes. Now, this announcement some people might not like, but I think the majority of people will like it, especially when they see the book of what I have in mind. Okay. So the publisher, the president of the company, the publisher that I'm writing, this is for Schiffer Publishing. It's a pretty big publisher. They have a lot of books in stores and stuff. When I presented my idea to him, he liked the idea, but what he wanted me to do was split it up into 2 volumes. Now, some people aren't going to like this because they say, oh, great, now I have to buy 2 books. But I think it's going to be worth it, because what this does is, instead of each game just having half a page with small pictures, each game is going to have at least 1 full page with larger photos. So you're going to get a lot more text, you're going to get bigger photos, more screenshots, and it's just more practical. It was going to be one massive, expensive book that you're going to have to wait probably another year and a half for or longer, or you can get the first volume probably early next year with bigger pictures, more text, more time, and real estate devoted per game. So I think on total, this is I'm really glad he suggested this, because I think it's going to be a better product overall to split it up into 2 volumes. Because I mean, 700 and something games.
Yeah.
Trying to squeeze that into one book was just going to be a monster, and the pictures were going to be small, and I was going to have to squeeze in. You know, I've got a lot of really good stories here from that people are sending in, like Martin Alessi, the guy that publishes Little Player magazine. That's a new magazine aimed at little kids that you can find at Barnes & Noble. You know, there's just so many good stories from so many different voices that I just didn't want to squeeze it down, and I'm glad the publisher suggested putting it in 2 volumes. So the first volume is going to be A through M, and then the second volume will obviously be the rest of the alphabet. And in addition to each game covered fully, in the back of the book, there's going to be some essays on, like Michael Thomason did a super essay on the Super Scope, real in-depth history of the Super Scope with each game. And then Russell DeMaria, I don't know if you guys have heard of him, but he wrote...
No.
Yeah, classic author.
Yeah, pretty well known.
Yep.
Yeah, classic author. He did a lot of the like Super NES game secrets, Super Mario World game secrets,
Oh, okay.
TurboGrafx 16 game secrets, back before the internet, you know, was really before everybody had the internet.
That's how you got game information.
He wrote game secret books. Yeah, he would write real in-depth guides. So I was really honored that he contributed an essay about the console wars. So plus he wrote some entries for the book too. So you're going to get a much better. You're going to get 2 what I think are going to be really, you know, extensive, good volumes that people are going to like a lot, as opposed to, you know, one book that would really be good but probably pretty cumbersome, you know, with every single game squeezed into one book.
Also
so I think
a little limited. So the two volumes is actually a better idea, because you can do, you know, what you said, bigger pictures and. Well,
yeah, I think it's going to be a
idea.
much better product. Yeah. And you know it probably won't be quite as much. You know, each volume will be a little cheaper than the one massive volume. So
you
know,
go.
at least you can spread it out a little bit. You know, you buy one early next year, it'll be the first volume, and then probably, I don't know, 6 months to a year after that, it'll be the second volume. But you have something to look forward to.
So you
but
planning
anyway,
on... Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I just think the 2-volume solution is I really like that idea. And if the president of this really prestigious publishing company, if it's good enough for him, it's good enough for me.
So is your plan to have the book released in both hardcover and Kindle format, like your previous stuff?
Well, that's a good question. The 100 Greatest Console Video Games, which is by the same publisher, I'm still bugging them to do a Kindle version. Now, the classic home video games books have all been put in Kindle format, as have my self-published books, like my book on writing and my Filtered Future, a book of short stories. All my books are in Kindle format except for the 100 Greatest Console Video Games, and I've still been, every time I talk to them, I say, so, are we going to get that Kindle version yet? And I say, well, we're looking into... apparently there's more to it than people, there's a lot of design work and figuring out if it's going to be worth, or I don't know. I think they should have done it by now, but they're, and I tell them, I said, look, gamers are very technologically oriented, a lot of them, especially the hardcore fans that buy books. A lot of them are very technologically oriented. A lot of them want a digital version of the book, and so far I'm still waiting. So hopefully this one will be digital out of the box, and I still won't be waiting. But so far what I know is it's going to be a large hardcover, full-color book. Hopefully it will be in digital form as well, but we'll see.
As far as I understand, making a book digital isn't too hard.
Well, I'll have you call my publisher and tell them.
All right.
Well,
making a digital book isn't hard. Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Well, with the self-publishing I've done, Amazon will sort of convert the format. If they'll convert it for you.
Yeah.
The format.
Right.
But I don't know. I'm still. Hopefully, I'll keep bugging them until it happens. Hopefully.
So you mentioned one of the advantages about splitting the project into 2 books is the price point. You're kind of hoping to keep it around the same $25 price point that your previous books are at.
Well, this is going to be a larger format than the 100 Greatest book, so I'm sure it'll be more than that. It'll be more than that. I mean, the 100 Greatest book is technically $35, but Amazon, with their discounting, it's usually around $25, $26 when you look it up on Amazon.
Yep.
So this book will be more than that because it's going to be a larger format. But anyway, price point hasn't been determined yet. I'll have to wait and see what the publisher says.
Okay. And you're hoping to get the first volume out like sometime early next year?
Yeah, that's it's due at the publisher this summer, but I'm hoping to finish it before then.
Okay.
So hopefully by spring of next year it'll be out, but if not, surely by summer. But I'm shooting for.
Yep. How is the research and writing of it going? Have you played all the games yet?
It's going great. See, I had been working on the Classic Home Video Games series. This was going to originally be the 4th book of the Classic Home Video Games series, so I've been working on it for years. So yeah, I've had the opportunity to play most of them and to do the research on most of them. And for the super rare stuff that I just don't have access to, what I've done is just written a description. Or written a description. I can still describe the game thoroughly. But based on YouTube videos and research and things like that. So I'll just give you the description, and then what I'll do is I'll have someone else come in and do the review, because each game will have my description of the game, and then followed by, somebody writing like maybe a personal memory or just a straight up, capsule review of the game. So like, for example, there's Mountain Bike Rally, which is a super rare game that you can even hook it up to there's one that hooks up to like an exercise bike.
Yes,
or something.
I've heard about this game.
Yep.
Yeah. So what I'm doing is I'm describing the game, and then I've got a guy that actually has all that equipment, and he's playing it and reviewing it. So that kind of thing.
Yeah, that stuff's not easy to find like anymore these days. It's kind of like with the Miracle Keyboard, because the Super NES version of that did not sell very well, so that's so that's hard to find these days.
Wait, there's an SNES version of that?
Yes, there is.
I thought there was.
It's a lot harder to find. Oh. It's a lot harder to find than the NES one.
Yeah, the NES version was much more common.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also
I've done most of the research and I've done most of the write-ups. I've just got a few write-ups on my end to do, and I'm still editing stories from other people, and I'm actually still soliciting stories. I've got there's still a small window of time for people to submit stories. If you just go to my website, BRETTWEISS words.com, the first entry, you can see where I'm soliciting stories for this book, and you can email me and I'll send you all the information. So if you're in the industry, if you're a podcaster, reviewer, if you've ever been in the industry in any professional, way, then send me a message, and I'll you might be able to write about one of your games and get your byline in my book. So there's a small, I'm probably going to be accepting stories for the next month or so.
Cool.
Because I can still, plug in some stuff before I turn in the book. So.
Oh, awesome. If you're taking submissions from podcasters, I definitely will have to look into that, because
what I can do is now a lot of the games are covered already, but
sure.
I can send a list of what has already been covered, and then you could pick from, pick a few titles or one title or whatever from the ones that aren't on the list. So there's still some.
I played and enjoyed a lot of the obscure games that came out with the system that probably not going to get too much love, but for example, like the Koei games.
Romance of the Three Kingdoms and stuff like that.
I'm a huge fan of that company's output. So, but
I'd love to get some. That's kind of some things I could use. So I'll send you a message.
I figured as such.
Very cool. Yeah, absolutely. Pat Contry, he wrote. Are you familiar with Pat Contry's book on the NES?
Yes. I've not read that one, but I am familiar with it.
Yeah, it's Ultimate Nintendo Guide to the NES Library.
Yep.
One thing, he hired a guy specifically to write about the Koei games, just because they're so detailed.
I'll check that out.
Because he asked me, he said, "Do you want to write about the Koei games?" And I was like, "No." And so he got one guy that was specifically interested in those games.
That's awesome.
Boy, that'd be like Greg's dream job right there.
Well, I'm a history major, so I hate those games up. I mean, because those are great. Because but not all those games. Not all those games are historical. I mean, Aerobiz is it's about the airplane industry. So, but
but it's history now.
Now it is, I suppose, but
Hey, if nothing else, it's video game history, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
speaking of Pat's book, I've got about 50-something reviews in Pat's book.
Oh, cool. Awesome.
Yeah, that was one of my... That was kind of cool. He, I got to know him at just setting up at different video game conventions, and so I kind of got to know him, and he asked me if I wanted to contribute to his book. He actually hired me as a freelancer for a little while to write for his book, so that was nice.
Oh, awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I know that you want to do. So I know you make a huge point, in all your books, which I totally agree with, and love, by the way, about wanting to play the game, the physical copy of the game on physical hardware, so you can actually compare and contrast it to how it was.
That could be pricey.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. That's what I prefer. I've got a big game room with all the consoles set up and stuff, and that kind of thing. I've had to borrow games from store owners and from friends and collectors and stuff to do some of my classic home video games. Some of those books in that series.
Well, I was going to ask you, do you ever use emulation just to check out the games to try to get some?
Yeah, sure.
Do you have a favorite emulator like the Super NES that you like using?
Not really. I mean, I just I'm technologically inept, so flash cards for the older systems and stuff. I'm fine with.
Flash cards are great.
Like that.
Yeah. That's such a wonderful idea to have flash cards,
right.
Yeah, cool. I certainly understand splitting the library up in two books because it's such a huge library. I mean, I'm surprised that you didn't do that like the NES back when you were covering it back in your earlier classic series because because I think the NES has an even bigger library in North America than Fighting Super NES does. So
well, they're both 700 and something.
Yeah,
I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but they're both over the 700 mark, I believe.
So yeah, getting it two books definitely give it the exposure and coverage that those games deserve. I think because, like you said, there's a lot of when you get a library that big, there's a lot of hidden gems that slip through the cracks that people just don't know about. Which is
also gives you a little bit of a break.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So I mean, that's one of the reasons. Yeah, it's one of the reasons that we want to do this podcast, to cover both the popular, well-known games and also the games that I think are very good, but for one reason or another, just didn't get the attention that they deserved, like when they came out. So
well, that's one cool thing about working on these books is discovering games that I hadn't played before that I find really fun. Like one example is Trog for the NES. It's a really cool classic maze game that I hadn't played before writing the book, so that was cool.
Right.
And then something like for the Odyssey 2, it's the title just anyway. I've discovered quite a few hidden gems myself, just researching these books.
Right, yeah, and that's actually kind of why I started doing podcasting because, you get these games and it's just like, hey, what are we going to cover? And then Greg will say, hey, let's do this game. It's like, oh, I never heard of this game. What is it? And then we play it and it's like, oh, okay, I really like this game. And then we'll reverse and I'll pick a game and Greg never heard of it. And then he plays it and he gives his feedback and it's really interesting because you just get to learn about the game's library and everything. And it's basically why the Master System Masterpieces podcast started because I knew nothing about the Master System and I didn't see a podcast out there, so I said, hey, why don't I just do a podcast while I basically learn about the library of this console? And it's been
cool.
A journey.
Well, one thing it does is give you an excuse to play a particular game. Sometimes I walk into my game room and there's just so many games. I'm like, okay, what game am I going to play? So it gives me a little focus on what titles to do.
Right. Yeah, and it's really fun because it's just like, okay, now I get to talk about how I feel about the game and how it felt, and I think it was really cool.
Yeah, it's research.
Yeah,
I'm not just playing a game. I'm researching.
Yes,
it's work.
Yeah. Actually, Brett, that's a good point because that was another question I was going to ask you. It's obviously it must be very difficult because I can imagine the difficulty if I was in your shoes trying to write about these classic games, a lot of the games I probably haven't played for one reason or another, it must be very difficult to try to like separate yourself now in 2017 from when those games originally came out and try to give it a fair and objective look, looking at the game as it would have been then as it's approached now. I mean, like, you seem to take a good balance of approach in your books for trying to look at it both ways, but it's like that's gotta be very, very difficult to do.
Yeah, and there's two good examples I give of games that in particular that I don't think have held up particularly well, but that are historical. Like Superman for the Atari 2600. I mean, that was a groundbreaking game because it was multiple scenarios. It was an early superhero title. It was story-based. You know, there's a number of reasons that game was influential and cutting edge, but to me, I don't really feel like playing it today. Another one is Utopia for the Intellivision, which I'm sure a lot of people, I'm sure a lot of people still love, but I don't know that it's held up that well. But it was definitely cutting edge and groundbreaking at the time.
I've been begging the homebrewers to make a modern version of that game for years.
Oh, that'd be cool. Yeah,
that would be pretty cool to see that.
Yeah, because I did that. Yeah, because I played somebody way back when made a unauthorized port to the Commodore 64, called something different, of course, that I had as a kid, and I love that game. I didn't realize it was actually based upon a television game like years later. So, but I can definitely agree with that. So
and there's, and opinions. The one game I get busted on that people say I should have included in the 100 greatest in the main body of the book. It's in the appendix, but it's not in the main body of the book. People just kill me for not putting in Mike Tyson's Punch-Out for the NES.
that's
in the main body of the book.
That's one of the few games. Like you didn't if I agree with.
Yeah, I like it. It's just not one of my favorites, and so I didn't include it. But it's in the appendix. You know, I gave it some notice.
Right. So.
And some people say I should have put in more Master System games, and you could definitely argue that point. But
you can never have enough Master System games.
Well, it was hard. Yeah. It was hard to. It was painful to leave certain titles out of the main body of the book.
I think even George would agree with me, however, that the Master System didn't really have too many super unique, awesome games on it. But there's like a handful.
Well, and plus they had to. I mean, once they were past '87, I couldn't include Phantasy Star because it came out in the U.S. in '88.
Yeah,
it came out in '88 in the U.S.
That's true. Yeah. So, but awesome. Well, it certainly sounds very, very ambitious. I'm definitely thrilled that you're going to be doing this. Because like I said, books in the system are pretty hard to come by, and so I definitely will pick it up as soon as it comes out. I also encourage you eventually at some point to finish your plan for the fourth book in the classic game series also, because I think that will also be fun to read as well.
Yeah, I'll probably whittle away on that one. Here and there. It's just from a sheer time and practical standpoint, it'll be a while.
Yeah, because those systems don't get a lot of love. So reading. So anything comes out. I'm saying a podcast. Like anytime that a system gets a book or a podcast comes out and whatnot, even if I had no history or experience with the system, I'll gladly check it out and listen to it because it doesn't matter if it's popular or obscure or big or small. I just eat that stuff up. So, have
you guys been listening to Earl Green's Odyssey 2 podcast?
It's an excellent podcast.
Yeah, he's a good guy. He's a friend of mine. He's really cool.
That was another reason I wanted to start the Super NES podcast because I was shocked at the fact the system that I said is popular didn't have a podcast out on it yet. But
yeah, that is pretty bizarre. I didn't realize. I discovered you guys. I saw you on Facebook, but I didn't realize there wasn't another one or.
Nope.
I mean, that's it. You guys are pretty much it, huh?
Yeah,
that's cool.
That was the big reason I wanted to start it.
Well, see, that's cool. You found a hole in the marketplace and you filled it. That's cool. One thing I discovered I didn't discover it, but that just came to my attention recently is the Classic Home Video Games books. Those are published by a company called McFarlane Publishers, and they do a lot of pop culture books. Well, it just occurred to me the other day that now that company has an entire section of books devoted to video games. On their website. Cool. The very first video game book was mine. Was my Classic Home Video Games 1972 through 1984, which came out 10 years ago this year.
Wow.
So that's the 10th anniversary of that book, and it was the first video game book by that company, which I think is kind of cool.
Just curious, do you know, or are you at liberty to give rough numbers as to how well your books have sold?
They do pretty well. I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
I don't like to talk the numbers quite like that, but the 100 Greatest has been far away the best seller because you can actually walk into a physical bookstore and buy it.
Right.
And it's the price point of $25 for full color. People like that, and it's been very, very successful.
And my personal preference, I think all your books are great, but I would have to agree. I think that one's my favorite, just because, like you said, not only because of the presentation, but also because, it's very interesting. Whenever anybody comes out with like a 10 best or 100 best, I'm always eager to pick it up and read it because I'm like, okay, do I agree or disagree? Like, how does he? How does he present the games? Blah blah blah, that kind of stuff. So, but
well, it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun to work. It was by far the most enjoyable book I've ever written because it was a lot of fun. There's anecdotes in there too, so I could tell stories about growing up playing these games or particular things that beyond just the description or review I wrote. I could go into more depth with some production history and some. Talking about me and my brother getting drunk on tequila, playing artillery duels, that kind of thing. So. But so yeah, it was the most fun to write, and it's been the most successful. So that's one reason I wanted to do a Super Nintendo book through that same publisher. With the big production values and everything.
I hope the book sells well because I think the Super NES has a very big fan base.
I think it. Yeah, I'm hoping it will.
I mean, this console's fan base seems to be a lot quieter than other consoles for one reason or another. But I know there's a lot of fans out there of the system. So I think maybe because the system didn't have the controversy that many other systems did. It didn't have it had a pretty long life with a lot of games. I think also that's another reason for it. It's a very kind of in the back system as far as a nostalgia factor and library goes. I think. So let's
call it a mature, refined system as opposed to the wilder and wackier world of the NES.
I thought there were a lot of wild and wacky games that came out with the system still.
Yeah, right. That's true.
Yeah, but
yeah, I see what you're saying. I mean, you've got people that will talk about the NES and the Atari 2600 and even like the Dreamcast and stuff and just go insane, and then the people love the Super Nintendo, but I know what you mean. It's that just maybe it doesn't have as many outspoken fans or something. I don't know. I mean, it's still very, very, very popular.
Oh yeah, definitely. So
it just doesn't have quite the vociferous fans that some of the other cult, some of the more, I don't know, hardcore. I don't know. I get what you're saying though, just with the hardcore fans.
Yeah, I would love Nintendo to come out with like a mini Super NES console, because I think
that's the rumor. There's a rumor now. I don't know if that rumor has any substantiation.
Oh yeah, of course.
But I think, I think it's probably wishful thinking, but they should as well as the NES Classic sold.
So just out of curiosity, thinking about niches and needs that exist in the gaming library and gaming history as it is. Going back to that point for a second, have you ever given any thought or possibly have an interest in at some point down the line, maybe years from now, but maybe like doing any books on classic handheld systems, because those don't get a lot of love either.
Yeah, just the access to them would be kind of difficult,
Yeah, outside of emulation,
right.
The Game Boy is the easiest one to get a hold of course. But then, of course, you get the problems that Microvision's not holding up very well, and and like the Game Gears all need recapping, it seems, and et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, there's very little out there on the system, so I think it would be great to have something out there on it.
Well, hopefully somebody will cover them someday. It may not be me, but hopefully somebody will.
Well, I was going to ask you, at least this is the last question I was thinking of beforehand. But if George has anything else to ask,
no,
in a moment, there definitely more gaming books coming out these days as opposed to even just like 5 years ago. I think I'm very happy to see that the marketplace for this has expanded a bit. Probably because I think it's partly because I think that gamers are getting older. Just like the nostalgia is kicking in more, so it's more interested. More interested in reading and writing and reading about this kind of stuff. Do you think the marketplace has gotten saturated to the point where somebody who's interested in possibly jumping in and trying their hand at doing articles or a book on classic systems can still carve out a niche for themselves? I mean, like, would you have any advice for anybody trying to maybe think?
There's plenty of room. I mean, if you look at the film industry, I use these examples all the time. If you look at film, sports, television, other entertainment mediums. I mean, there's thousands and thousands and thousands of books for all that stuff, covering every little thing. So I think there's plenty of room for more books and articles. I mean, you could have biographies on specific superstar programmers. You could have a book about different composers. You could have a book on the Dreamcast. A thorough book on the. I think there's still a lot of possibilities. I think we're not even close to a saturation point.
Self-publishing also seems to have gotten like a lot better these days too, which makes it possible for somebody to be able to release a book like a small print run, like for example.
Yeah, it's real easy to self-publish, especially through Amazon CreateSpace, and
oh man, you don't even know all the stuff that people release on there.
Well, you definitely have to weed out some of the junk.
Yeah.
And most books you can look through the first few pages on Amazon and kind of give you an idea if it's going to be quality or not. So
one of my favorites is Time Pimp.
Time Pimp. Yeah, not familiar with that.
Do I even want to know?
We'll talk about it later.
Well, one trap people can fall into is just buying a book because it's cheap or because it's has the word Atari or Nintendo in the title.
Oh yeah.
But take a little time to research, read the first few pages, read some reviews, see what people are saying about it before you plunk down your hard-earned money. Yeah. There are just quickie, cash grabs or whatever.
Oh yeah.
And there's not. It's really hard to write a book that's going to be a cash grab because, it takes a lot of time to write a book, but there are people that just try to crank something out quick to get it out there on the market to try to get some attention or some easy money, but just do a little research and you can figure out which books are worth buying. But yeah, I would definitely recommend Leonard Herman's Phoenix 4. That's excellent.
Yeah, great book. I'm really enjoying it so far because I read his earlier editions too. So.
Yeah, and Pat Contry's Ultimate Nintendo. That's a great book. And let's see, if you're a Sega Genesis fan, Ken Horowitz put out Playing at the Next Level. That's a good book about some pretty historical. Some of the key Genesis titles,
right.
And so that's a pretty good book. And Michael Thomason came out with a really fun book called Downright Bizarre Games, games that cross the line.
Yeah, I've heard of that one, but again, not picked it up yet. That definitely.
Yeah, it's a little pricey. It's $40 for kind of a small soft cover.
Yeah,
but it is full color and it's a lot of fun. Maybe you could get I don't know if there's a digital version or not, but that might be an option. But it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, but one other classic video game book I really enjoy. It's dated now a bit, but it does have its problems. Like I will admit that. But I still think it's kind of an enjoyable, quick, flamboyant book that kind of covers the overall history of the industry, kind of like how Phoenix does. I still really enjoy reading Steve McKen's Ultimate History of Video Games, for 2001.
Oh yeah.
The interview is the best part of that book because he's got some great interview segments in there. It does have some problems. It does have some errors, but just for a quick, easy to read. Because it's not quite as meaty as Phoenix, which is both. But I mean in a good way because it's a bit easier to plow through, and just the interviews.
Yeah, and it's written in a more readable style.
Right.
Phoenix is like a textbook almost. And,
it is now. The earlier versions weren't like that too much, but this one's definitely more of a textbook feel to it. But they're both great books.
Well, I think Stephen Kent's book is it's the best-selling nonfiction video game book of all time, like video game history book of all time, I believe.
Huh. Well, I believe that, yeah, because it's been out for a while. So. But,
another one I like a lot is the Art of Atari. Of course, that's been getting a lot of attention, but that's a lot of fun.
Yes, it is. Just like the pictures alone make that book like worth reading. It's just like.
Oh yeah, and the unreleased art and stuff, really cool.
But so I'm definitely very happy that. I'm very happy this is coming out, and I'm very happy that you're covering it because there's not. You're definitely one of my favorite video game authors.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
But like out there, like people like people up there like Leonard Herman and some other people. I have a guy in mind, but I can't think of his last name right now, so I won't even try. But you
remember the book?
No.
It'll come to you. It'll come to you when the podcast is over, right?
Yeah, I'm sure it will.
Of course, that's how it always works.
So I mean, I probably would pick it up and read it anyway. But the fact that you're actually coming out with it definitely puts it like I'm like you must buy list as soon as it comes out. So.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Maybe we can head back in the podcast in a year or so, like the book's like actually out.
I'd love to talk about it once it comes out. That'd be awesome.
But George, you have anything else you want to ask him generally before we get to like into more like specific stuff?
How do your books smell?
They smell like warm fat.
Oh.
No, I don't even know what that means.
No, I don't either.
I'll put it there. They have that new book smell.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Another reason to buy them.
Yeah, sexy, huh?
Awesome. So just getting into a little bit more general Super NES stuff here. I guess obviously you have to have some affection for the system, like you wouldn't want to be writing about it. So I'm curious to hear about your history of the system, when you first picked one up, and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so I remember I was working at Lone Star Comics in 1989, and I remember when the Sega Genesis came out, and it was really exciting, and I kept hearing about how awesome, what's the early game where you turn into Altered Beast? I remember hearing about Altered Beast.
Yep, that was the packing game.
Well, then, and then when Sonic the Hedgehog came out, that cemented it. I had to get a Sega Genesis, so I already had a Sega Genesis, so I had that. Already had NES, had Atari 2600, had ColecoVision, had all these old systems. And then when the Super Nintendo came along, it's like, well, that's awesome, but I don't really need that. I've got plenty of console, I have plenty of games to keep me busy. Thought I might pick one up eventually, but then I did when the first price dropped, basically, because I rarely buy a system when it's brand new. I feel like I need to get some kind of. I kind of do this. I think my dad. This is my dad and me. Being frugal and everything. I have to have an angle. So I think I don't even remember what it was, but the first price drop with the Super Nintendo, I picked one up.
Well, the original price was $200. I know because I'm like you in a lot of ways. I'm very frugal. I almost never pick a system up until it's been out for at least a year. But the Super NES is one of the only two systems I did pick up and was somewhat new because I got that system for Christmas. For Christmas '91, when it only had been out for about 5 months at that point, and the store was selling it. The store was selling it at a discount, like $180. So
that's really, really cheap.
Yeah.
If you think about the history of consoles.
Yeah.
I mean, the Atari 2600 was $250, and that was 1977.
Right. So I think the first price drop probably happened in '93 when it came down to 150.
I believe that's when I got mine. Yeah. So it had been out a couple years, but of course I love Super Mario World.
Yeah, that was at the back end of the time. Yep. So
so great.
Yeah.
And just a lot of really great. I mean, Super Castlevania, of course the big Contra 3. The big titles I just absolutely love for that system. Just sort of in NES games, but beefed up and louder stereo type sound and. Just bigger sprites and whatnot. And
plus, by '93, the console definitely had hit its strides, and there were some really awesome games that come out by that point. Like that was Super Metroid wasn't out yet, but Street Fighter 2 come out already, and that was just the killer of the system. So,
well, it's funny. Street Fighter 2 Turbo, my wife and I played the heck out of that game. We got really, we got to where we had to quit playing it because it got so competitive. I got to the point where it would get tense where we just would actually fight about it in real life, not just on the screen. And so we transitioned, a year or two later to Donkey Kong Country. I think that was, off the top of my head, that was 94 when it came out.
Yeah, 94.
And so again, that we could actually cooperate and play together. So like she likes to joke that Donkey Kong Country saved our marriage. But yeah, big fan of the Super NES. Obviously, just great system with just gorgeous graphics. Now, some of the slowdown concerned me early on, like with Super R-Type.
Yes.
I mean, that was where I was like, okay, great. So every game is going to be that's going to require some kind of people were saying, oh, the Sega Genesis, it's fast and all this stuff. But luckily, the programmers, I guess, figured out the Super Nintendo, and later games didn't have as much slowdown, and that system could have fast games too. So, but yeah, that was definitely a sticking point early. Everybody was worried about the slowdown if that would be able, future games
that
are going to be like that. That
didn't bother me too much, mostly because of the fact that by that time I already pretty much established myself as being like a big fan of like adventure games and RPGs, the type of games the system really was built for, and the games that shine on the system. So the fact that it's a processor didn't really bother me all that much. And Super Mario World was great. I didn't see any slowdown or anything on that. Just like that game. So for a launch game that perfect, it was very impressive. But
it's too bad they didn't follow suit with Super Mario launch games for some of their other consoles. That would have, like say the Switch,
right?
Or the Wii U. Right. That would have been nice.
Well, we are going to be covering Donkey Kong Country in this episode. I don't think we mentioned that earlier, but
we are.
We are, yes.
Oh man, I played Seventh Saga again.
But before we get into it, I was just curious. If you don't want to spoil anything at this point, Brett, I do understand. But I am curious to hear. In doing your research for the system, what games you didn't know about that you found that you really enjoyed, and have become favorites of yours?
Ooh, let me think a minute. It's kind of let's see. It's a little bit of a blur at this point. I've been playing so many games and so many.
I totally understand.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many games I love. Like, right now, what's coming into mind is just the one I played all along, like the Earthworm Jim's and all that stuff. I'm thinking of all the ones that I've really enjoyed playing all along. Let's see. Some of the fighting games, like some of the side-scrolling combat games have like the Batman Forever, I think it was.
Yeah, Batman Returns we already covered in the podcast earlier, and that's a great game. Yeah.
Yeah, Batman Returns. Yeah.
I definitely understand that because the system's prime years were during the whole Street Fighter craze when fighting games was so popular. So there were a ton of fighting games that came out with the system, and a lot of them got missed. Some of them are very good, some of them not so good. George and I recently covered Street Combat, and what a turn.
Or was it Combat Street? I keep forgetting.
Street Combat, if memory serves, that one. It's a good game is Judge Dredd, platform shooter.
I've not played that one. I'll have to check it out.
Surprisingly good. That's a good example of a dark horse, of a hidden gem.
Yeah,
interesting.
Judge Dredd, because you think, okay, movie title, that's going to be crappy, but it's actually very good. Good action.
I was a fan of the comic.
Action-packed game.
Yeah, I was a fan of the comic as a kid, and the movie is not horrible. I actually enjoyed that. So
yeah, it's okay. It's watchable.
Yeah, Sylvester Stallone hams it up pretty well. So it's cheesy, but it's fun. So, but
Kirby's Dream Course is cool. That's a good. Kirby. You think of the platforming games, but the little miniature golf Kirby's Dream Course. Oh yeah,
that's a cool game. Right. Yeah.
That's a fun little game.
Yeah. But yeah, didn't he have a pinball game for the system too? I think, or maybe that's for the Game Boy. I'm trying to remember.
I think that was the Game Boy.
Game Boy, yeah, right.
Off the top of my head.
Yeah, but yeah. So I mean, yeah. So like the underrated gems of the system are definitely fun to talk about, and I'm definitely looking forward to reading those like in our upcoming book. But then again, there's also nothing wrong with the popular games, and the popular games like for a reason. I mean, Donkey Kong Country was the second best selling Super NES game of all time, with 9 million copies, like 9 million copies like worldwide. So
right.
you're talking the big hitters. You can't get much bigger than this one, but.
Well, what's good, Donkey Kong Country, what's so cool about it is you can have a very experienced player play with maybe their kid or maybe their parent that's better than them, but you can have one player that's very experienced and really good at games play with a weaker player, and then you can just give high five when you want the stronger player to go through a really difficult area.
Speaking about difficulty, one of the things I found out when researching this game is that the original build of the game that Rare had shown Nintendo was much harder than the released version. Nintendo asked them to make it easier because they wanted the game to have more family appeal to it and to make it more accessible to gamers of all levels. So, and this game is still pretty tough. So I can just imagine how difficult the original version was.
I can't imagine. Oh.
So good move on Nintendo's part, asking them to tone it down some.
Well, Donkey Kong Country 3, I think, is more difficult than the first one.
It is, yes. I definitely.
Yeah. I cover that one.
We're gonna talk about the series a little bit here later on as well. But for the original game, obviously, as I said, it was developed by Rare, the well-known British-based video game company. Came out, and this is kind of surprising. Almost simultaneous worldwide release. Back in the 90s, this didn't happen very often. Nowadays, it's very common, but I think because the fact that Nintendo was pushing the game so much, and also because of the fact there wasn't a lot of text in the game, so that kind of made it easier to translate and whatnot. But November 21st, North America, November 24th, Europe, and November 26th, Japan. In 1994. So within like 5 days, got worldwide release. So that's So that's pretty cool. We probably don't need to talk about Rare too much. I think most people listening to this podcast know about the company. Long history of the company working Nintendo on games up to this point. Originally established in 1985, like in England, as I said. They did a lot of work in the NES days, porting games to the system. Converting like computer games. Like for example, Pirates and like Sound Service were Rare ports, for example. Which most people don't realize of those games, how much porting that Rare did for the NES like in those days. That was their bread and butter for them for a long time. Before they eventually started to publish their own games.
Right.
But by Super NES days, they didn't do too much for 16-bit systems because the NES was still doing quite well during this time period, and Rare was focusing more upon trying to develop their technology and trying to do something more impressive above the cut, which is kind of how Donkey Kong Country that came along, because they showed Nintendo a prototype of what they were doing with silicon graphic hardware and chips and whatnot. Nintendo was pressed enough that they gave permission for Rare to make something the Donkey Kong license, which Nintendo tends to had up to that point very jealously guarded and protected. So Donkey Kong Country was definitely graphically impressive when it came out. I mean, I was in college when this game came out, and I remember Nintendo did a huge marketing push for this game, and I remember the commercials that came out for this game when it got released in the fall of '94, and seeing that commercial come on in the shared dorm room, the dorm lounge, like we watch TV or movies or whatnot. It was just jaw-dropping to see this game in action, because you're like, holy crap, is this going to do that? So it's like...
Oh, absolutely. It looked next-gen. I mean, the PlayStation 1 was, was going to be released in America the next year, September of 95, and it released December of 94. So it basically came out the same year that PlayStation did, and a little before it, and it looked like a game for a next-gen system. Absolutely, it absolutely blew my mind how good that game looked, and it breathed life into the. I think it extended the life of the Super Nintendo for 2 or 3 more years.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, this is. I wouldn't call this a late Super NES game. Because the system had been out 3 years at this point, but the system continued to get support for 3 more years after this. So it's kind of like a mid-tier game, but definitely this is. Yeah,
say it kept it going strong.
Exactly.
I'll put it that way.
This is the start. Yeah, this was the start of what I consider to be the second tier games of the system. Games like Chrono Trigger and Super Mario RPG that came out like the years after this. We're definitely next generation games on the Super NES. So it definitely did help extend the console's life, and definitely established. I mean, Rare was probably known at this point, but this is again that really put Rare on the map. That really elevated them to one of the elite game developers, which they held on to for quite a while, and which was the reason that ultimately Rare got bought by Microsoft in 2002. So, but did you buy this game when it first came out, or did you pick it up later?
I got it when I saw it. So I bought it not long after it came on sale. I mean, when it was brand new, I didn't get it, but I got it. It seems like I don't remember how many weeks or months after it came out. Somebody ran it on sale for like $38.
Wow.
I remember that. And somebody had a really good sale on it. Like just one of the. They would do that every once in a while, just to bring people into the stores overall, And they would run an ad in the paper or whatever. And I rushed out and got it. What these stores will do is run a game, announce a game for being well under, retail price, but only have a few of them out, and then and then put them away until the sale's over, and then bring them up, just get people in the store. But anyway, I got it for like $38 and something. So I got it. Yeah, I got it maybe a few months after it came out.
Nice price, yeah. But I never owned this game, but I did rent it, and I certainly borrowed it from friends. So I certainly played it. I played it for a while after I beat it. And George, correct me if I'm wrong, you didn't have any history of this game until you started playing it on this podcast episode, right?
Yeah, not really.
But
it was interesting taking a look at it though.
Well, it's I love this game. Played the heck out of it. Played with my wife. Played with my kids. I beat it a couple times, but I love the game, but I never got so fanatical about it that I tried to find everything. I never tried to spell out Kong in every section. I never tried to get 100%. That was just too much.
I never either. I think I got like 90%.
Wow, that's pretty good.
So, but
that's not bad.
But yeah, I mean, I guess the main reason I didn't buy this game is because George and I talked about this recently, like in his last episode of the PlayStation Power. I was a huge fan of platformers as a kid because, of course, I grew up. Like I said earlier, the NES was my prime system as a kid, so and NES had a ton of great platformers on it. But by this point, '94, I was in college already. I was already my gaming tastes had, I don't want to say matured, but they simply evolved to where I was enjoying spending most of my time playing simulations or RPGs or adventure games, and I was starting to fall out of favor platformers by this point. And I think this game definitely has enough charm and appeal to that I wanted to play it, and I definitely did enjoy playing it back then. But this was like borderline. This is really kind of the period where I started falling out of favor platformers, just because I thought that they were old tier to me by this point. I mean,
yeah, they definitely saturated the market, and they've done so many. They got a little redundant after a while, I guess, with all the cute characters, the mascots and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. It just gains credits that I found the game as fun as I did because of the great graphics and because of the Donkey Kong mechanics present and the other great gameplay options. But still, I was like, this is fun, but not worth buying it. The replay value needs to be limited. Now, as you mentioned,
well, the graphics were groundbreaking, but the gameplay wasn't necessarily groundbreaking.
No,
it was
not
fun.
really.
The controls were great and stuff, but you still climbed vines. Right. You still, you did a lot of the things that people have been doing in platformers for years. It just did it well.
Now, I have no experience playing this 2-player. I do agree with you 100% that I think if you have somebody to play this game against, it definitely enhances its gameplay value by 1,000%.
Yeah. And like I said, for two really skilled game players, they may want to play it by themselves just so they can be playing the whole time. But it's the perfect game for like a parent and a kid, or someone and a spouse that's maybe not as good at games or something, just so you can, so a weaker player can actually beat the game because the better player plays the harder parts,
Yeah.
And so it's the perfect game for two mismatched players but that still want to play something together.
Right. Yeah. I mean, like, the love and care that Rare put in this game definitely shows, because, like, Rare spent 18 months developing this game with a team of, 12 people, and like I mentioned earlier, Nintendo did give them some advice and guidance on it, like Shigeru Miyamoto, the creator of Donkey Kong, didn't have too much. He didn't have too much input. The input like the game. He did suggest a couple things, but most of his input was like very, very limited. So this is just mostly Rare's baby as far as the actual game itself went. But
is 18 months a long time for this era?
Yes, it is, because the average Brett may know a little bit more specifics than I do, but from my understanding, during the Super NES Genesis time period, the average development time for a game was like 6 to 12 months.
Was how 6 to 12 months?
Yeah.
That sounds about right. Yeah.
So I mean, and I think most of that time was probably on the graphics, just because like you mentioned earlier, Brett, the game itself is pretty basic as far as the actual gameplay goes. It's just a typical platforming game. I mean, it's big. There's 40 levels in it.
And it's got some unusual bonus rounds that are a lot of fun.
Yeah, the bonus rounds are definitely interesting.
My favorite is the ostrich one flying through, where you can go through and get so many bananas. It's so much fun. I can get over 400, so you get 4 extra lives that way.
Yeah. I do appreciate the fact that the game starts with 6 lives. I think that's great.
Well, one thing I like is that you can advance really far into the game, but if you run low on lives, you can go back to the first level, because it's easy to collect a bunch of lives in the first level.
Yes, it is.
And go back and collect a bunch. What we'll do, we'll get far into the game. If you run low, you can go back and get 20 more lives, and carry them forward.
I do love the fact there's 2 playable characters in the game, and I think those 2 characters actually play different from one another, which is different from many other games.
Yeah, the strengths and weaknesses.
Yep.
It's great.
Yep. You can either play Donkey Kong or Diddy.
Yeah, I wish I knew the speed running stuff, because Diddy is so overused in the speed runs for the game.
Players, good. Yeah, I was going to say, experienced players prefer Diddy because Diddy's faster. He's faster and quicker, so he's easier to avoid damage.
Right, but he also does that cartwheel thing,
yes,
which is pretty cool.
But Donkey Kong
cartwheel attack.
Yeah, but Donkey Kong I think is definitely easier. Is definitely the better two characters to play if you're new to the game, because he's stronger and tougher.
There's certain enemies he can kill that Diddy can't.
Right, you'll just bounce off their heads and they'll be fine. So I've learned that the hard way.
Yeah.
Yay.
Interesting, small bit of trivia here. This is only mentioned in the manual, as far in the manual, but Donkey Kong in this game, Donkey Kong in the game, is the son of Cranky Kong, and Cranky Kong is the original Kong from the Donkey Kong, Donkey Kong arcade games.
Yeah, I've heard. That's because people think Donkey Kong that you're controlling is supposed to be Donkey Kong from the arcade.
Nope,
it's not.
It's a son.
Yeah, right.
But
it's not Donkey Kong Jr.
No, it's not. So, yeah.
Are you sure about that?
It's a little bit confusing, but that's.
Did anybody do a DNA test?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, like I said, the game itself is basically platforming, but there are a lot of things that they did add to the game to try to make it stand out. Like I said, for example, the 100% completion. If they want to be completionists, you can go for it, but it's not necessary. The 2 different characters are also another factor of that. Another one I appreciate. The animal helpers, that's cool. The animal helpers are designed to appear in certain levels where they're most needed and helpful, and it's really cool.
Yeah, they're fun to control.
Yeah.
I like doing the rhinoceros and pounding through going through the cave.
That is great.
Yeah, and pushing on the
through
fast
everything.
when you're running fast and stuff. That's a lot of fun.
Yep, there's the rhino, the ostrich, the swordfish, the frog, and the parrots.
Not a big fan of the frog.
Yeah, he's a bit hard to
Yeah.
control.
Yeah.
Like the frog suit in Super Mario Brothers.
Well,
3.
no, that was easier.
I mean, it was easy in water, yeah, but
Yeah. The map screen is also a nice touch. They took that from Super Mario World, I think. Just like, being able to track your progress of picking the next level that you want to play.
I think you mean Super Mario Brothers 3.
Super Mario Bros. 3 had it first. I think that
Yes.
the map screen in Donkey Kong Country reminds me more about the one from Mario World, though.
No, I'm making a joke. No, I agree with you.
Right.
I was just making a dumb joke.
Keep trying. No, I'm kidding.
Whoa!
Just kidding.
I quit podcasting forever.
No. Come back. Come back.
The map was pretty detailed. I like how everything in the game was so detailed. It was just unreal.
Yes.
Looking at this game and thinking that this was on the SNES.
Yeah.
Amazing. I mean, they're like basically pre-generated stuff, but still, games from the SNES era are so different. Because nowadays, if something's pre-rendered, it's just like a video or something, which we're doing less of. But back then, to have something look like that is just amazing across the board.
Right.
I really did not like playing this game too much. My favorite part was like watching other people play it because I'm terrible at platformers.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And I was getting pretty frustrated with this game, but the more I went on, the more I liked playing it. But I'm still at that point where it's just like, yeah, no, thank you. But I really enjoyed listening and looking at the game. The music, especially, is very nice.
Yeah. I was going to comment on the music next. The music, I think, is a very good track. It's not. I wouldn't call it. I personally would like to place it in my top 10 for the system. But the music's very good and it's very appropriate for the game. I mean, the music matches the stages like so well.
Yeah, it's pretty memorable music. I like it.
But
Yeah.
I mean, and when you get good at the game, it's not that long. There are plenty of runs on YouTube of people getting 100% of the game in like under 2 hours. So I mean, I think the average game will probably take maybe 4 or 5 hours to get through the game probably. So, but not that long. Pretty good for platformer.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's so many levels in the game.
But like I said, 40 levels. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty it's pretty like meaty game, and because that
Especially on top of the whole secrets thing?
Yes, yep. I was going to say,
man.
you can play it however you want to. If you want to be a completionist and try to get 100%, go for it. But if you just want to go through the game, nothing's stopping you from that either. So, but
Can I complete the game in a pretty pink dress?
maybe do graphic
If you,
modules.
we don't judge. We don't judge here.
That's good.
Yeah,
I would never do that.
Yeah, and even the plot of the game is kind of fun, as silly as it is. I mean, like, it's typical Nintendo stuff. Like, just like Donkey Kong has his banana horde suddenly stolen like one day, and he goes after it by a gang. Like, King Rool and his Kremlin, so he just goes off to get it back. I mean, just like simple platformer stuff, and just definitely feel that Nintendo cuteness and charm that they're known for, like their games.
Right.
Cool King Rool.
Yeah. Who's actually that's a pretty tough boss battle at the end of the game too, I think. We haven't talked about the difficulty yet. Like we'll get there, but I think that boss fight's definitely one of the hardest things of the game.
It was really hard for me.
Yeah. The difficulty of this game, I thought, is pretty good. I mean, it's still tough. I'm glad Nintendo told Raider toned down some, but because I can't imagine a young kid being able to get to this game because
I think it's a pretty smooth difficulty level because sometimes you'll have to play the same level several times to beat it.
Yeah.
But if you're pretty, decent at games, you can usually get through a level, but you might have to take a few times, which is, pretty smooth.
I thought there were
Greg,
some
when you told me,
Sorry.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say that when you told me that the original version of the game was more difficult and Nintendo asked them to tone it down, I was like, wait, what? This game already is pretty tough, but maybe I'm just really bad at video games.
Yeah.
Well, I played a lot of platformers.
I don't think it's that hard. I think but I do think you do have, like, the minecart. There are some parts, like the minecart challenge, and then there's that one level where you have to turn the red and green lights on and off, and time your jumps just right. So there's some challenging parts that you'll have to replay.
Timing.
Yeah,
I think this game a few times.
I think this game is moderately difficult for platformers. It's certainly not the hardest platformer out there, but it's not the easiest. I think that there's no cheap deaths. I thought the game was fair, and
it never gets cheap.
But on the other hand, I think there are some stages that are brutal because they ask you to make a perfectly timed jump or a perfectly timed move, and if you don't get that down right, forget about it. So I do dislike that part of it, but
I will never be able to forget about it.
Fortunately, the controls are up to the task.
The controls are great.
Good controls for it.
Oh yeah, they're
What's
very
really
tight.
frustrating is a game that requires time jumps and has sloppy controls.
Yeah.
That's what pisses me off.
Yeah, very tight controls because it was like you said, a platformer really needs those to do well, and there's no problem. There's no problem at all like of this.
It just adds challenge to it.
Right.
You press that jump button and it doesn't, it drops the input. Man, that just adds extra challenge.
So Brett, I'm curious to hear you talk about multiplayer a little more because I have no experience like that game mode.
Oh, you haven't played the two-player Donkey Kong Country?
Never had a chance to, unfortunately.
Are we talking about competitive or cooperative?
Both.
Well, it's cooperative.
Well, I mean, because there's two modes. There's the individual, and then there's the cooperative or whatever it is.
Right. Yeah.
Well, the two-player, you're only one person controls at a time. And what you'll do is, let's say you're Donkey Kong and you're by yourself going through the game. Well, you can pick up a DK barrel and crack it open, and then Diddy Kong will be there by your side. And then, if you get killed, or if you give Diddy a high five by pressing a button, the other player will be controlling Diddy Kong.
Right.
And so you work together to get through the levels by just sort of like doing it like tagging off, if you just get tired, if you just want to let the other person play or you get killed or something, the other person takes over. So you're not actually controlling the action at the exact same time. It's sort of simultaneous alternating, if that makes any sense.
Right. Yeah. There are like George said, there are two different multiplayer modes. There's the competitive contest mode, like in the cooperative team mode. So you're talking about the team mode there, right?
Yeah, that's what I always played.
Okay. Yeah. The competitive mode is just pretty much the contest mode. It's just pretty much like each player throws a different set of Kongs, and they take turns trying to get through each level as fast as possible.
So it's like Super Mario Brothers 3 multiplayer.
A little bit, yes. So that sounds fun if both players are good at the game.
It does.
Yeah. I just want to see who knows a little, who knows a bit better. But I agree with Brett. I think that the team mode, like where the two players are cooperating, probably is the better of the two.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, but you could also be mean and kill yourself, and the person's like, "Oh, great! Now I need to finish this terribly hard level."
Yeah, you could sabotage each other, I guess.
Yeah.
And sometimes you inadvertently sabotage the other person, leave them hang them in a rough spot.
We talked about this a little bit earlier. I think this game is good for kids, but I'd be interested to hear what you think about this, Brett, because because like I said, I know personal experience. personal experience with this. I think young kids would probably have a hard time with this game, but I think older kids, maybe around like, I don't know, 10 or so, probably would be able to handle this game like on their own.
10 would be a really good age for this game. If you've got like a 6 or 7 year old, they would be better off playing it with a parent, and then the parent can let them go through some of the easy parts.
Yeah.
And then switch off when it gets more difficult.
Right. So so obviously this game was a huge hit. Like I said, it got rave reviews when it came out. Still gets rave reviews today. There actually are a few people, however, who are very vocal in their dislike of this game.
Yeah, I've heard some of that noise. You know, a lot of people say it's one of their favorites, but you do it does have its detractors.
The biggest complaint I hear about this game is those great graphics, the graphics that we talked about earlier. Personally, I think those graphics are great. I think they're a work of art.
Yeah.
They work very well. But I've heard some people complain.
Art.
Yeah, I've heard some people complain that it looks. I heard some people complain that the art style looks horrible to them, or it's kind of like his.
Wait, what?
It's not aged very well. It looks like clip art from phones. So I think it's like, I could see that, but it's like I mean, the graphical style is not going to appeal to everybody. I can agree with that. I mean, like, personally,
the complaints I hear about it are that it's just platforming without any revolutionary gameplay concepts. I don't really hear anybody complaining about the graphics.
Yeah, I think platforming has enough. The platforming is basic platforming, yes, but I think the game has enough interesting stuff. The platforming formula that's really worth checking out.
Yeah,
but,
I agree.
Wait, so the barrels weren't like some kind of like new thing? I think the barrels were used pretty well.
The really
added new gameplay to it.
Well, the barrel's shooting you out into like that. I don't recall that in an earlier game. I mean, there's some novel elements in it. It's just some people thought maybe it was a little overrated, the game. I mean, it's hard to say that. It's hard to find anybody that'll say it's a bad game unless they're just hating for hating's sake. But
I know, right?
Some people might have thought, some people I think thought it was a little overrated just because it got so much praise, but did have a lot of the staples of platforming.
Well,
but it just did everything so well.
Well, there's a couple prominent retro podcasters I'm thinking about right now, who have been very vocal in their stuff about their dislike for this game, primarily because of the graphics. But I can see that the graphical style is very unique. There's nothing quite like this available with 16-bit systems.
I think it's a fantastic looking game. And one thing I look at graphics the way I look at art. I mean, I think a game can look great even if I think there's some gorgeous games from the late 70s and the 80s that maybe aren't all that technologically advanced, but they still look nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
even with newer games, you could do the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I also really love the fact how this game kind of kicked off a resurgence about Donkey Kong in period as a character, because he had been pretty much...
that was the first one in a long time.
Yeah, very long time. Nintendo hadn't done anything with him since Donkey Kong 3 back in the arcades, like in the 80s. And because of this game, if this game had not done very well, we wouldn't have gotten the great Donkey Kong Game Boy game, or we wouldn't have gotten Donkey Kong showing up in N64 and GameCube games and other stuff like that. So
and those with my daughter, I would play the bongo games for the GameCube.
Oh man,
those I actually had some fun with those just because I was playing with my kiddo.
Yeah. We wouldn't have Donkey Kong as a playable character like in the Mario Kart games, for example. I mean, this game...
Or Mario Party.
Yeah, or Mario Party. Yeah, also. So this game definitely kicked off a
resurgence of popularity for the character. Yeah.
So I am thankful for that. So and this game of course spawned several sequels. Rare, since they had the formula down pat, they were able to get the sequels out in a pretty fast period of time. Donkey Kong Country 2 came out a year later, late '95. Donkey Kong 3 slightly '96. The fact they were able to crank those games out so fast is kind of impressive, but I guess it's because that they really weren't all that different from Donkey Kong Country 1, which I think is one reason they were able to get the games out so fast. It's also because it's also a complaint I have about them, because they're not really all that different. They're just kind of like more of the same.
Yeah, the big appeal with Donkey Kong Country 2 was Dixie Kong's spinning helicopter attack.
Right.
That was probably the biggest difference between the two games. And that's a fun move, and it's cool to float through the air with that maneuver.
Yeah.
That was probably the most distinctive thing. But it was more the same. But in this case, for me, that wasn't bad.
Oh yeah,
I enjoyed the first one so much.
I certainly am not going to fault Rare Nintendo for cranking it out, because
Cranky Konging out.
Yeah, right.
But
there you go. There's a funny joke.
That's the first one in this entire podcast.
That's right. I've been waiting.
Yeah, I just didn't have as much fun playing 2 and 3 as of course I did the first one, though, because I did rent those games also when they came out, and I'm like, this is just more of the same. So it's like it didn't really appeal to me all that much. But I think as far as the original trilogy is concerned, number one's the best game.
Yeah, and I'm not a huge fan of. I mean, I love all three, but if I had to pick one that was my least favorite, it would be the third one.
Yeah.
It introduces like some non-linear elements to the overworld map, which I wasn't that thrilled with.
Yeah.
And but they're all good. They're all high quality. But the third one didn't endear me to it as much as the first two did.
Speaking about high quality, have either of you guys played the Donkey Kong Country port that came on the Game Boy Color?
Nope. But
I did. It's been a long time.
I was very impressed by that. I mean, I think that's probably they got that game ported perfectly. They even added on to it on the Game Boy Color. Yeah, to
squeeze it down into the Game Boy Color, that was pretty impressive.
It was that game is the second most technologically impressive game on the Game Boy Color that I'm aware of. I think only Metal Gear Solid, the Game Boy Color, is probably you pushes the hardware a bit more. But the fact that the fact that they were able to get this game on the Game Boy Color and play look as good as it did is just simply mind blowing. Like, it's a great port of the game.
No doubt. No doubt. Definitely a system. Squeezed just about everything you could out of that little system.
Yeah, that came out in 2000. There was also a straight port of this game released in the Game Boy Advance back in 2003. So you can also get in that format too if you want to. Later games of the series, Donkey Kong 64 came out with the Nintendo 64 in 1999. One of Rare's last games that they did with Nintendo. I've not played this game. I've seen it in action before, and it looks like, again, more of the same. I think it's certainly
different because it's 3D.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's true. But as far as the I should have said as far as the gameplay itself goes, it's pretty much more of the same. It looks like so.
Not really. It's more of a search. It's more of a quest game. There's a lot of a lot of downtime in the game where you're searching for stuff, which you don't really get out of the Super Nintendo ones.
Right.
It's more of a search, a quest, than at least compared to the three for the Super NES.
It does seem
I didn't like it as much.
It does seem to show off the N64 abilities very well, though. Like, I will give it that.
Yeah, it's a good looking game. It's just I don't like it as much as the Super Nintendo ones.
Right. Which way do you have to hold the controller for that game?
Just normal.
Yeah. And for a while, of course, that was the end of the series because, of course, like you said, Rare got purchased by Microsoft in 2002. So it didn't seem like we were going to get like any more games in the series for a while because of that. And in fact, when the games did come back, it was a different company handling it now. Retro Studios got the rights to Nintendo, like the Donkey Kong series. You'll probably know them best because they're Metroid Prime series. They're the company that did those games. And they also did some work on Mario Kart 7 as well. So that's so they came out with 2 games in the series somewhat recently have come out like under their watch. Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, 2014, and before that there was Donkey Kong Country Returns, 2010, like for the Wii.
Right.
Yeah, those are both really solid. And you've definitely got more of the same compared to the Super Nintendo, those are more similar to the Super Nintendo games than Donkey Kong 64 is.
Yeah.
Those are more similar because they're more platforming than. I mean, Donkey Kong 64 has some similarities, but the Wii and the Wii U game are more similar.
Well, I mean,
but they're good. They're good. They're hard. They're harder than like the first Donkey Kong Country, I think.
I think the reason why Donkey Kong 64 was what it is because there's a third dimension to use now, so let's use it. So
right.
Yeah. And I was gonna say Donkey Kong 64 got very mixed reviews. Some people love it, some people hate it. But
it's still a super hot seller at shows and stuff.
Yeah,
everybody's always looking for it still.
Oh yeah.
But the Wii and Wii U games got very high reviews. So.
Oh, those are great. Yeah, they're excellent. They're challenging though. They're not. They didn't tone down the difficulty.
Well, by now I guess they figured that gamers are probably like more experienced. I guess they expect like harder games. So I think it's kind of why they wanted to like crank it up a bit, like that reason.
Well, they'll challenge you. They're a lot of fun though. I mean, they're not like impossible or anything, but you'll have to do the levels a few times, some of the levels a few times before you can beat them, just like the earlier ones.
Yep. Donkey Kong Country is also available for purchase like the Virtual Console. If you want to
not surprised.
Yep, that way. So as far as eBay goes, we all know about the price spike Super NES games are going through like right now. And this game,
$500.
Actually, all things considered, this game's not that bad. There's a huge range of prices for this game. So if you want it cheap, you can get it for cheap. You just have to be patient for it. But there certainly are many copies available. There's 61 copies currently listed, 375 copies that I recently sold. And here's that price range I was talking about. Card only is sold as cheap as $16.
Oh.
And as high as $43. So like I said,
no, thank you.
Yeah, the price range. So if you want to be patient, you can pick the game up for like relatively cheap. CIB is not that bad either. CIB pricing range anywhere from $34 to $67. So
I'll usually see Donkey Kong Country card only. I'll usually see it for at a show it'll be $20, $25, something like that.
Which is a good price. Like I pay that much money.
Sure.
I like this game. But there was even a sealed copy of this game. A sealed copy of this game that sold recently, like on eBay for $200.
How much?
$200.
Oh, okay.
So, but yeah.
Close enough.
So there are also a bunch of glitches and secrets like in this game as well. I'll just cover the more interesting highlights here. There's a way to be able to do free switching between two players, like in the multiplayer modes if you want to, like a code. There's music tests available in the game. You can also start the game with 50 lives if you want to, which will make the game easier. There's also glitch in the game that you can do to be able to get infinite lives. So you can jump in midair by doing a certain trick, and you can also and there's also a way to be able to get the rare like blue balloons like a bit easier by using this like glitch. So a game as loved as this one has been like picked and analyzed and like played to death. So people have gone forward and backwards all through this game and found numerous bugs and cheats and whatnot to use in this game. So if you're a fan of the game, it's definitely worthwhile checking these out because like this game's been examined very, very thoroughly at this point. So, but those are the more interesting ones I found. So, George, let me ask you first because you're the first, because you're the one of three of us who didn't have experience playing this game back then and played it now for the first time. What do you think about this game as a? What were your impressions about this game playing it now without any history and nostalgia with it? Both the good. both are good and bad points for you. Understanding the fact that you're not a platformer.
I didn't like playing it. I'm sorry.
Boo.
I know I'm terrible.
So you're that guy. You're the one.
Set me on fire. Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, it's funny. I know some pretty hardcore gamers that don't like platformers, and I'm like, huh?
Yeah,
You know?
I don't play too many platformers much anymore these days, just because I'm kind of tired of them. I mean, like, but
run their course.
I mean, there are exceptions.
Yeah.
Like, for example, I loved. Probably because of the fact that it was kind of like style 8-bit game, but Shovel Knight's awesome. And I would consider that to be a platformer, but so there are exceptions. But yeah, so
anyway.
So George, maybe something I dislike is because of the fact you're not really a big fan of platformer games either. But I'm curious to hear what you think of. If you can expand those thoughts like a bit more for us, please.
Yeah. I don't know. It just. The game felt a little difficult for me. I mean, so I'm not very good at timing. My accuracy is not great when it comes to jumping. So it's a lot of, oh, I just missed that guy's hitbox. Now he walked into me, I'm dead. Or, oh, I timed this barrel thing wrong. I rammed into the enemy and now I'm dead. Or I overshot it and I fell and I died, or I undershot it, whatever. But I mean, like, I enjoyed the game more when I watched somebody play it and when, I just paid attention to things like the music and everything.
That's cool.
So, yeah, the game was very impressive.
Like watching a really great cartoon or something.
Yeah, something like that. Like,
That's
the
cool.
game was really impressive on the music and the way it looked. The animation was great. I mean, it's awesome to watch somebody play it, and then it's awesome to watch somebody like speedrun it, because there's so many like exploits, and it's like, oh man, like if you do this thing like specifically wrong, you could actually really mess the game up, and it's over for you. But yeah, they actually did a relay for AGDQ 2017 this year.
Yeah, I see that.
They played through the 3 games. And that was really awesome. Just like, I sat there and I watched the whole thing, and it was really cool. And just going to this game, covering it for this podcast, and I had to play it, and it's just like, it just wasn't as good as if I was watching somebody play it.
Okay.
So,
I understand that.
Like, for me, it's more of a distance game. Like, I'll stay away from the controller for this game, but like, if somebody is really good at it and plays it, like, it's really fun to watch.
So it sounds like you really love the graphics and music, from the whole presentation of the game. It's just actually playing the game. You didn't find it like to be too much fun.
Yeah.
That's fair. I can understand that. Brett, let me ask you, because you're the one who has a huge history like this game. I believe I know the answer to this already, but I'm going to ask it like the record. Do you think the game holds up today now, like as well as it did back then?
Yeah, I really do. The strength of the controls and just it looks so nice, and just the secrets and surprises and the 2-player action. I mean, I think it holds up very well, and I still enjoy playing it. My wife and I, as a matter of fact, started over on it recently after years of years of not us playing it together. So yeah, that's cool. So we find ourselves laughing and having a great time again. So very well.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the middle for this game. I certainly do. I had fun playing it. It was fun going back to it after not touching the game for like 15 years. And I still pretty much feel the same way now as I did back then. I think it's a very good platformer. It's just not my cup of tea. Just because of the fact that I'm kind of not really too much on platformers anymore these days. But as far as it was certainly very impressive when it came out. I still think the game looks and plays great today. I think it's a very solid platformer. I recognize this is a great game. I recognize that it's very fun. I can also recognize the complaints and problems that people have about the game. And just like
Well, anytime a game has a reputation as being so famous and so on somebody's list of favorites and stuff, you're gonna have people pick it apart, or call it overrated or whatever. It just comes with the territory.
I do think it's a bit overrated, but I still certainly agree. It's certainly it's deserving. It's certainly deserving in its place as one of the best Super NES games.
Yes.
I mean, I would not.
Fair enough.
I would not take that away from it at all. It's certainly a classic. Anybody who's not played this game and enjoys platformers at all definitely should check this game out, because I think it certainly holds up very well today. Just like if you want to play an emulation or play on the virtual console, like we have save states, because it certainly can help. I certainly can help in certain areas. Just make your game playing experience easier if you're not very good at the game. So, So I mean, and anybody who's a fan of the game's modern versions definitely is worthwhile going back checking out this game, because it's amazing to me how similar the games still kind of feel. The later
Yeah, definitely. You definitely feel like you're playing the classic when just new levels or something.
Especially with a different studio making the games now. I mean, that's so rare because, rare. But
Podcast done.
When another studio takes over a franchise, there's usually a very radical change in the games. But not in this case. The new ones certainly look and seem to play, because I haven't played the Wii or Wii U ones.
They're very faithful to the classic style.
Yeah,
so.
that was very impressive. So well done by them. So definitely. I think this game certainly holds up today as far as a platformer. It's just not my personal cup of tea. I won't go back to it, but it's not because it's a bad game, not at all. It's just not something it's just not the kind of game that I ever enjoy. But I enjoy playing very much these days. But like I said, but like you said, Brett, I have experience playing this two-player. I think if you're playing with somebody else, it certainly enhances the game appeal quite a bit. So I definitely play this. I definitely would want to play. Would relish a chance to play this with somebody else, because I kind of think that.
Especially if it's I think we might be starting to repeat ourselves here, but but playing it with. It'd be the perfect game to introduce, if you have a little nephew or niece or something you want to play a game with.
Not too little, but
introductory game.
I mean,
oh, don't make me feel bad.
Well, just because of the, like I said, the better player can get through the harder parts.
Right. Yeah. So.
Anyhow.
Yep. That was all I had to say about the game, I think.
You think?
George, did you have any other final thoughts on the game?
No.
Okay. No. Brett, how about on your end?
I think we covered it pretty fully.
Okay. Well, it was certainly great having you on the podcast. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
I've enjoyed talking to you guys.
Yeah, thank you very much.
It was nice having you on.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you very much for taking the time on your busy schedule to come on here, talk about your books and your upcoming project and covering the game with us. We did.
Sure. If you want future updates, just to see what's going on, you can on Facebook. Just go to Classic Home Video Games on Facebook and just like my Facebook page. Like I said, it's Classic Home Video Games, and I'll have updates on my Super Nintendo book, and you can go to my website, brettweisswords.com. You can find articles and links to my books and stuff that way.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Yep. Yeah. Like I said, anybody who's not read his books, definitely I highly recommend checking them out, especially if you're a fan of classic consoles, because I read all his books are very well written, easy to read, very fun to go through. You may not agree with all the opinions, but they're all very backed up, I thought. So. Well,
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. I appreciate you saying that.
But we definitely would. We definitely would love to have you back on at some point to talk about another a game system so much we enjoy. So
please don't make it Donkey Kong Country 2.
No. We'll do a non-platformer next time.
Awesome.
All right, man. Good talking to you guys.
All right, sir. Thank you very much for the help. I appreciate it very much, and thank you for gracing us to this episode with your presence.
All right. Thanks a lot, guys.
All right.
Talk
Take care.
Later.
Hey, thanks.
All right. Bye.
And we thank you guys very much for listening to another episode of Super NES Podcast, and again a very special thanks to Brett Weiss for being on the podcast with us. George, what game are we covering next time?
Mario Paint?
Mario Paint, another classic game. Another game published by Nintendo. We're gonna be
For sure.
Most people know most people are familiar with this game because it's the ability to be able to create tons of music, like the music player of it. But it's also like a very good paint program containing the cards as well, and a pretty good mini game as well.
Yeah.
So we're going to be talking about all. So we're going to be talking about all aspects, like all aspects of this classic game. And George is also going to give us
Even the mouse.
Yep, and George has an actual Super NES mouse. So even though we've already covered the mouse in an earlier podcast, George will talk about his firsthand experience actually using the mouse and how well it works.
That's not firsthand experience. I've had experience with it before.
Firsthand, I mean that means like actually using the device yourself directly. So.
Okay.
It fits. Don't be nitpicky.
Oh, I get it. Hand. You use your hand to use the mouse.
It's not.
It's a good one.
That wasn't what I was going for, but whatever.
Yeah, I know.
So, George, how can somebody reach you if they're so inclined?
Oh boy. You can find me on Twitter. That's at Mr. Chief, at MISTURCHEEF. But you can also find me in other places, such as my podcasts, The Box Fort, which is not family friendly, PlayStation Power podcast Greg and I do,
right.
Cover PlayStation 2 games. I actually have an interesting thing to talk about that on that podcast. Can't wait. That is not family friendly. And I also do Master System Masterpieces, which we cover Master System games. And our last episode was very interesting.
Yes, I've not listened to it yet, but I definitely will check it out soon.
Yes.
I'm behind a podcast like right now, trying to catch up. So
I hear you.
So yes, we also have a Facebook page. Please come on there and to get updates information on when new episodes drop and that kind of stuff. You can also email us directly at the SNES podcast at yahoo.com if you have any questions, comments, suggestions for games, etc. As I mentioned earlier, we have more guest hosts planned in the near future, so stay tuned. We are a proud member of both the Retro Junkies and Throwback Networks, where you can find other great retro-themed podcasts, both gaming and non-gaming related. So check them out. Ooh. And if you use iTunes, we're on there as well, and very much appreciate review. So I think that's about it. George, thank you again for doing another flight of the podcast here with me. And
of course,
we will get into some more interesting games coming up pretty soon that I hopefully will be more to your liking.
Yeah, like Mario Paint.
The stretch calling Mario Paint a game is but it works. So yeah, we're keeping up the very interesting, different, special stuff with the episodes coming up. So stay tuned for that. If you're an oddball, weird stuff, we got more of that coming up for you. So keep listening.
Yep.
Thank you again very much out there for your support, and take care all.
Goodbye.
Nintendo controls 80% of the video market. But no matter how you play the game, or which game you play, things definitely have come a long way since Pac-Man. Now you're playing with power.